Hi, good evening, all. We've got 10 people so far.
Who have we got?
Great, great. Hiya, Pete.
Hi, everybody.
This is Catherine.
Hi. With the wintry scenes, we were just talking about how lovely it's out there.
Absolutely, yes, yes. I've just gone for a bit of a walk, actually, and it's nice just to be in the fresh air. I presume you all had a nice Christmas and ready for a new year?
Yes, we
Anybody has anybody got the jab yet?
Not yet.
My husband has.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yes. Had it yesterday. He's
You
going
can
to come
shake
and
hands with him now.
He's a bit sore.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. My brother-in-law got it. He's 80, just over 80 right there. He got it there. He got his second one today.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Second. Wow. I did. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so Linda's here now as well.
Oh,
Linda.
Linda.
Hello, Linda.
Connecting away there.
Yeah, right.
Singer.
If you move that up onto there, you get these.
These guys sit down.
Okay, go away. If you move that.
So has anybody been doing any artwork over the Christmas?
A bit of sketching.
Did you? Yeah. Well, is it outside sketching or indoor?
Indoor.
Right. Oh, nice. Yeah, it's good.
I think you'd have to be brave to take a seat outside.
I think you're right, actually. Yeah.
Anyone for plain
brave
air?
or some other name.
Yeah.
Oh, I like your Christmas lights, Jennifer.
Yeah, well, I haven't quite got around to taking them down yet. We like them too much.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Just keep Christmas going a bit longer.
On my walk out tonight, right there, I saw one house with lights on it. It was just nice just to see it, and they also had a Santa Stop Here sign outside as well.
No.
That's cute.
So we have 11 people so far. I think some more might be joining as well too. Yes.
Okay.
So maybe I could do a show of hands for how many people paint in watercolour. Is there anyone who paints watercolour? Excellent. Okay, so quite a lot. That's always interesting to see. But it's very applicable for, I think, for acrylics. A lot of people say that to me anyway, if you use semi-abstract acrylics or...
Peter, I can't hear. Can you go somewhere else?
You tell them.
Have they got you?
Oh, Sue.
Oh, Carolyn.
Hello.
Oh, is that Carolyn? Is that Pat's friend?
Yes.
Oh,
Is that Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn.
Oh, hello. I didn't
How are
recognise you. Sorry. I'm all right, thank you. Yes.
Good.
hello, Carolyn. I know you're Pat's good friend. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't seen much of our friends the past few weeks, but
Well, that's
no.
right.
we're in weekly contact.
Zoom is good, isn't it?
Lovely. It really is.
Watercolour.
That's Catherine. That's
Hello, Catherine.
Hi there, lovely to see you all joining
Lovely
in.
to see you.
Yeah, really nice. Do feel free to
Looking
chat.
Well, should we put ourselves on silent?
No,
Not
no,
yet,
not at the
that's
moment. No.
fine.
Yeah.
Not yet. Okay.
I'm really looking forward to your talk and presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I looked at some of your work. It's inspiring.
Oh, fantastic. I am very
But we need
pleased.
some inspiration.
particular time of the year, don't we?
Oh yeah, thank you, Brian. Yeah, I think so. I was just saying that I'm a bit rusty because I haven't done anything for the last week, and that's like the longest I've gone without painting. But I hosted my mum and my brother at Christmas for the day, and ever since then I've just felt really Christmassy and not in the mood, but I'm back there now.
No, that's fine. Well,
Yeah.
can I just say you have probably the most sympathetic audience you'll ever have.
That's lovely to hear. Thank
Well,
you.
the prevailing conditions, I mean, we just need these things, don't we? It's terrible.
Yes, we don't want to look at any news screens, just screens of painting. That's much nicer, isn't it? Yeah. Dreadful. And it's constant, isn't it? But we'll banish it from here.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to get an alarm in a second from my phone, I reckon. Yeah.
I'm coming.
We've got more people coming in now.
The right one.
Do you have a tick list of how many people when we?
Well, we've got 22 so far, actually. So if we just give it another 2 or 3 minutes anyway, Catherine, just to.
Okay. And if anybody gets chucked out because of technology, we're going to switch over hosting again in a minute, and then I've got a phone here, but then also, Michael, you'll be able to speak to people and say, come back in. Yeah, we just there's a waiting room, as you probably saw. You were brought in from a waiting room, so you might end up banished into the waiting room for just a short while before we see.
I'm getting used to the waiting room idea and Zoom and all that kind of stuff. Waiting room 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, but if you, I don't know whether you have numbers and telephone numbers of each other, but if you text each other and say, I'm locked out, shouldn't happen.
So we've got 24 so far, and more coming in, 2 more coming in now as well. So
when was the last time you all met? You've had a few Zooms, haven't you? I think.
Peter, can I ask
just
you?
before Christmas.
Right.
We met, and I think this is our 3rd one, actually. I'm not so sure. I think it is, actually,
it's lovely. I've just done a few, but for art groups, but it's surprising how few art groups are really
if you go on here,
able to use it for something.
Right. Well, we're just learning anyway as well, too.
Yeah.
it's the speaker.
You can sit back in your chair.
No, Peter, it's switching all over the place. I want the whole thing.
Just to let you know as well, too, gang, when Catherine starts
I can't just get that
demonstrating, I was muting you all as well.
No, you can get the speaker, actually.
Carolyn,
Hello?
Hiya, you might see that you can toggle between 2 different views somewhere on your screen. There's a speaker view and a gallery view.
Yes, that's what
Yes, so if you're on,
I've just found that.
Brilliant. If you're on speaker view, you will jump, you'll see one person, then the next person that speaks. But if you're on gallery, everyone will sit there for you, so you can see everybody. Yeah. My problem is I don't know iPads very well, so I don't know what the sort of display is like for Zoom on iPads. So sometimes people have iPads. So hopefully you're all sitting comfortably, and hopefully you can prop up your screen so you can see well. I'm going to bring I'm on a Mac, and it's basically just stationary, so I'm going to drag it towards me in a minute so that we can see everything a bit more closely. So don't worry, it will get bigger.
Right, so I guess we might as well start now, Catherine.
Okay.
Somebody else coming in. Yes, welcome to you all now to our very first 2021 Zoom session, as I think we're going to have Zoom sessions for a few months anyway. And our person tonight who's doing the demonstration is Catherine, and she'll explain a bit about herself as well too. And what I'll do is just to let you know, I'm going to mute everybody, and if you want to ask a question, just put your hand up, or there might be a little button somewhere where it says put your hand up, but just put your hand up anyway, and I'll see you and let Catherine know, so she hasn't got to worry about seeing people.
Yeah, great.
And yeah, that's it basically. So Catherine, we've got 26 people here at the moment. And
26,
that's it, yeah. So I formally hand over you.
Okay. Do you think
Okay.
Margot and Linda are all right? I just see they don't have their video on.
Yeah, they're okay, all right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They're okay, but you can hear me, both of you, I know, but hopefully you're all right. You'll just be listening to me as if you're listening to the radio, but that's fine. So hopefully you'll be able to find your video. So I'm going to just reclaim host then and mute everybody. So I'll just do that if that's okay. So I'm reclaiming the host, and now I'm going to mute everyone. But remember, you can unmute yourselves. And if you've got a question, it's really lovely. In fact, a lot of you have muted yourself already. I find it really useful, actually, to have questions. So just switching back. So hopefully, can you see me in the main part of your screen now, hopefully?
Yeah.
And I'm going to mute everybody, but do remember to unmute. I don't mind interruptions at all. I may burble on a bit and not be very clear sometimes. So I'm quite happy for you to ask questions. So I'm just muted. Actually, in fact, everybody's muted, aren't you?
So if you can leave me unmuted then, so anybody puts their hand up then.
Okay, I think everybody's muted themselves, so that's great. I will leave you unmuted and just say hi. So I'm coming to you from near Bath, a hillside near Bath, basically just at 6 o'clock on the clock round Bath. So we're on the northern edge of Somerset where we are. It's very misty at the moment, which is lovely. Fantastic subject, brilliant for watercolours in particular. I've got just a few pictures to show you, but I just wanted to, by way of introduction, just take you through a little bit of where I'm coming from, so you know when I'm speaking the range of things I've done. So I definitely am a painter rather than an artist. I don't have much angst, but I do love atmosphere, and I'm trying to get atmosphere in all my landscapes. I actually particularly love portraiture. It's how I began. So I was in a proper job until my mid-20s when I jumped back to painting because I love painting so much. And I really felt the desperate need to paint, actually. It was getting a bit problematic for me. The easiest way of painting all the time and justifying it, I suppose, is to actually make a living from it. And that was my logic, really. And I started in Singapore because that's where we were. And that was it's quite isolating, actually. There's not that many people who are painting representational work there at the time. Only a sort of quite a fledgling gallery community, or even you know, like art museum community. There was very little. Completely changed now, of course, in Singapore. But I started with family portraiture. So that was the easy way in. People were asking me, and it was good because I was using pencil a lot of the time. So it was getting my eye in and trying to work out, really connect with the person in front of me and work out how to create form. I'm just going to let Wendy in from the waiting room. So she's just popped in. Yeah, so starting with these pencil portraits, and at the same time I was painting, oh, I'm just going to mute everybody again. Okay, I'm going to unmute you, Michael, because something happened there. Okay, asked to unmute. Okay, so yes, at the same time as the pencil portraits, I was painting the disappearing architecture of Singapore, and I was doing it in oils. And it was because I painted in oils at school. I don't think we got a very good art education. I did A-level, but really we weren't given any direction whatsoever. It was that sort of era. So I really felt like I hadn't acquired much of a range. So I went for what I knew, which was oils and pencil. And it wasn't really until we came back to the UK in 2006. So we were in Singapore and I was working and I had an exhibition. And the format there is there was a very lovely British High Commission and the British Council, and they actually assisted me in setting up my first solo exhibition there. And then moving to Malaysia, I got quite commercial. I started printing quite a lot. And so anyway, 2006, we're back in the UK. And the obvious thing for me was watercolour, because I just looked at the subtlety of the landscape. It's completely different. The tropics, it was that very clear, not always blue, but solid sky, solid edges to everything. And here there's much more subtlety and nuance. And I reached for watercolors. I'd already started trying to dilute my oil paints with, so I skipped across to water soluble oils and started to add water, but I was not getting the effect I wanted. It was very grainy. So I don't know whether any of you have used water soluble oils. You can't dilute them like watercolors. They don't go into a solution. They trickle down and then you've got these little lumps of pigment in them. So it's just not the same. So I realized watercolors was going to be where I had to go. And starting with them really quite flat on the table. But then what happened was I was still doing portraiture and I set up a couple of very, very large portraits, and I realized to get the perspective, I needed to stand up, and I tilted my watercolor. And it was brilliant because I suddenly discovered how mobile watercolor is and how helpful watercolor is. It can mix itself. There's all these watermarks it can make. It can, two pigments, if they've got slightly different properties, they can collide and make wonderful shapes as well. So all of those opportunities opened up as soon as I started to tilt my page. So today I've got a very steep gradient, so you can see very easily, but normally I tilt my paper about that. And the other part, crucial part of this whole process is this, which is watercolor artboard. And I discovered this, and then since then I've discovered a watercolor ground that you can paint onto wood and make a hard surface that will take watercolor. So when I discovered this artboard, so this is just normal watercolor paper, but it doesn't have a weight because it's actually got mount board on the back. So one side you can't paint on, it's smooth, and the other side is absorbent and like normal watercolor paper. So it's cold pressed paper that I tend to use. But I do have now a source of very, very large sheets of this, which you can get rough as well and not. But basically these today I'm going to be using cold pressed, and I'm going to use an A3 size because it's just about right for this sort of 2 hours. So the watercolor board was revolutionary, tilting was revolutionary, and of course with the board it's rigid, so I don't need to muck about with stretching and I can get stuck in, and it stopped me procrastinating, which I think's been fantastic as well, really useful. And you know, you can cut these bigger boards up into as whatever size you want, of course, just get a Stanley knife out, but it's I often do actually, I end up with different size paintings at the end just because I've sort of attached them a little bit. So I'll get onto that towards the end, but just wanted to talk about the other aspects of watercolor that's particular to me. So if you're a watercolorist, I don't know whether you use pans or whether you use tubes, but a big part of what I do is putting on almost solid paint. I need some examples to show you. I'm just reaching across. I'm going to get a few pictures. Unfortunately, they're mainly, well, luckily they're mainly sold. So it's just the sort of demo things that I've got here. But I know this has got some tape on, but can you see the granulation all around here? So I'll just work out the way around it is. This is with all sorts of granular paint. And this is absolutely solid. Actually, it's called Moonglow, a Daniel Smith paint manufacturer called Daniel Smith from the States. And so I've started to use really hefty tubed paint. And that's why tubes for me are more important than pans, because the density of paint you can get from just putting solid paint in onto water sometimes, and then it goes all sort of it trickles and makes spidery shapes, and also I'll put on some beautifully thin paints, like in here, this painting. So this is, oops, just sort it out, which way round, that way round. This has got some classically transparent paints like turquoise. There's a phthalo turquoise, a big area there as well. Some opera rose and purple lake and things. And they're all very transparent, and they're sort of the opposite to the very meaty, heavy paints like the Daniel Smith Moonglow. And this is salt. So I've used salts to play. This is just a bit of fun from the imagination, but each salt crystal creates these lovely shapes. So we're talking about just using the watermarks that they make. This lovely form here is just purely from water creeping up the page and managing to create that beautiful shape there. So some people hate these cauliflower shapes, but I use them quite a lot. And let me show you another very heavy paint this time. This is a pen and ink, but it's got some more Daniel Smith, which is Cascade Green, a very heavy paint. And of course, ultramarine and sap green, they're all pretty heavy as well. So there's quite a lot of variety in the actual tubed paints that you can use. And I'm trying to mix and marry them together so they react. So just to double check, I'm sort of covering everything. It's getting a range of tone with watercolor. That's what I'm after. And to be honest, it's all about tone because I'm mostly interested in painting light. So that's I think most watercolorists end up with that sort of color is important, but light is everything. So my portraits are very full of shadow, etc. Without going on too long, I might just share a portrait with you so you can see how you can actually use watercolors to create some very strong portraits. If I just share screen. So you should be able to see now a picture on their screen, and that's one of my sons. It's a few years old now, 2017, but this is watercolor, and it's actually on a clay surface. So that has another different sort of feel. It's got these edges where I've got the mouse arrow moving down. It's the edge of a wash. So, and you can see on his shoulder another edge. So that is what I'm trying to produce on paper, but it doesn't come out quite as strongly as on clay like you see here. And so it's very much about tone, one side being darker than the other in this case. And if I just now show you the picture we're going to use today, it's a picture called Sun Rising Over Water, and it's not this time of year, it's more about sort of October time, you know, that lovely time when there's mists all the time over rivers and brooks in the bottom of valleys. So this is the bottom of a valley. You can see the sun, which is pushing through the trees, obscuring some of the branches, and it's basically shining on the light, a light on the water. The water's pretty rough, and I was trying to decide which of the sort of sunlit features I was most interested in, but I'll talk about how I constructed this, and then that'll reveal what my thought process was. But this is Sun Rising Over Water, and it was in a series of pictures that I did when I first arrived back in the UK. And this is another picture of the same brook. There's actually, the brook goes under this little ruined bridge, and you can really see the sun in this one. So I'm very interested in sun rays, all those little obscured sort of lit elements in landscape painting. And then a final one of the same area is this one, which is a picture of the same brook. The brook is at the back of this field, and it's creating this wonderful mist cutting through the sort of midway through the trees and rising up the slope above.
That's
so
a lovely painting, Catherine.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you. I love the atmosphere of mists. I could go on about mists all the time. So the first exhibition I did when I came back here was called Atmospherics, and it was all about mist and these lovely, the way that the sun can obscure and the mist can obscure light, form. So form becomes a little bit lost, doesn't it? And it's rather lovely and great in watercolor, of course. So there are a few. So you might not see the similarity between that portrait and the landscapes I've just shown you, but believe you me, they are the same method. The only thing, sorry,
I've got a question.
Yeah.
On the pictures you were running through, I know the one that you mentioned about using pen and ink,
Yes.
with the buildings and the stone walls. So is that what you know? Unlike the other pictures which don't have any buildings in there, is that what you how you typically bring buildings and things in?
It's really intriguing because in Asia, and I don't have to hand my, well, I can show you Asian pictures later maybe, but they were all buildings. That's what I was interested in, isn't it? I love heritage, I love history. So I was looking at architecture all the time out there, and what was stunning was that I used to paint a building that was sort of decrepit and soft around the edges, and not much later it would have been knocked down. So it was becoming a sort of a project, which was why I just sort of followed it. So this one isn't typical of how I paint, actually. The forms I paint. I don't paint that many buildings anymore, but it was a perfect sample or image or motif for pen and ink, because it's got these wonderful walls. And so what I tend to do is I put the pen on first, because it's permanent. It can create this sort of like clothes hanger or scaffold, and then the paint is dripped on top, and strong tone brought out if I need to. But so yes, to answer your question, it's not so typical subject wise. I've got another one here. They're much stronger colors more recently. That's an area really close to my house. I just walk the dog a lot of the time, and I find these, it's again the light. So the sun sets at the back of this painting, and I'm just looking straight at, particularly here, where it's just on the brow of the hill dips down that way. And then there's a walkway up here, and it's just a spot and a half at sunset. So it's about that eclipsing I'm interested in. And having said that, let me just show you one more. I'm going to avoid painting at all at this rate, aren't I? So I'll be very quick. Just to show you another picture of how I will paint buildings these days. It's quite a recent one, if I can get it up. I actually managed to squeeze in an exhibition in October with, it was exhausting. It was by appointment only, which was very tiring. Here we go. Oh, here's one. So I'm going to share this. This is not typical. So this is a set of streets in the town very close to Bath called Frome. It's got a huge concentration of listed buildings, and this is called Catherine Hill, and it's got one of those really Harry Potter-esque squeezy skinny little buildings. And so I was interested in light again. It's the dusk when lights have come on in windows and on the street, but there's still a bit of light in the sky. And then the last one I'll show you, I'm most interested in at the moment, which is dusk completely, which is...
And that last picture was fantastic, because I tend to do almost all drawing and a bit of ink, but I want to do more watercolour. But I want to bring watercolour into my drawings, so that was perfect.
Oh, brilliant! Well, pen and ink, it's just they're made for each other. So this is, again, I was talking right at the start about the way that watercolour moves and how it can create these lovely sort of crazy meetings of minds, almost the thick paint meeting the very thin transparent paint. You can see it in the sky here. And this is the same point as the last picture that I shared, which is dusk. All of the lights are shining in the wet, and yet you've still got some glow on the horizon. And I just think it's a magical time at the moment. So I'm quite obsessed with dusk at the moment. But yes, those are very different, aren't they, from the subject we've got today. So let me start, otherwise I will never get anywhere. So I'm just going to come out of all that. And what I'm intending to do, so I'm just going to bring the my Mac right up to the painting now, so you can get a good look. And I'm going to raise the painting a bit higher so you can see. So what I've got here is just a printed version of the painting that I just showed you that I'm going to use today. I'm just going to tape. I'm just going to grab some tape. Wait a second. Thought I had some on here. I was nearly perfectly ready, but I put the tape in another spot. So I'm just going to tape up this sheet of paper. This is basic paper because I'm just going to give you an idea of how I'll plan a picture first before I actually start painting. And I do plan because I think most watercolorists realize they need to preserve the white. It's not enough to put on those lovely thick tubed watercolor paints. You do need the opposite side of it, things, which is the white of the paper. And it's the only way to get white, isn't it, really? That's the brightest white. So I said that I was going to talk a bit more about, just get that straight, about how I decided what this was going to be about. And if you notice, you've got the sun here, and you've also got the white of the river or the brook here, where the sun's hitting it. And I started off with them competing, and it was just irritating. It's not comfortable somehow to have two focal points that are so strong. And I was much more interested in the water and the way it sort of advanced towards the viewer. So I knocked this back, and actually that is not paper in the original. It was painted over a bit, but this is pure paper. So if it's very intricate, a painting, I'll use masking fluid, which is typically, I use a lot of Winsor & Newton products. It's force of habit and they've never let me down. So a lot of them, I switch some paint colors, but certainly I use Winsor & Newton. This is removable masking fluid, but today I'm not going to need to. I'm just going to, they're not very large areas, sorry, they're not very small areas of white. So if it's a small area of white, I need to put masking on, but if it's large, I don't. Now you'd say maybe, oh, but these are small areas. Well, no, they're not, because I leave the whole of this area white and then I paint into it. So I don't need masking fluid in this situation. I can show you all sorts of pictures of white bridges and they definitely need masking fluid. So I'm just going to shunt back a little bit and just describe this, plan this painting with using a felt tip pen so you can see, because it's just impossible to see pencil, so annoying. So just to show you what you're looking at, we've got this, the brook itself is sort of like that. So that's the area of water. And then the point that I always identified very early on is this, the focal point. And for me, it's where the darkest darks meet the lightest lights. So we've roughly got a sort of an area like that where the water is lightest. And we've got what's particularly beautiful is this sort of serpentine tree. And the darkness of that tree here will make that shine. So it's not just about painting, leaving white paper, but it's also about leaving a very strong bit of tone juxtaposed next to it. So that's that main tree. I'm effectively spending most of the time making sure that works. And you might notice the blues, the quite electric blues. There's some down here, but there's also quite a lot here, and that helps to draw the attention to that spot as well. And apart from that, we've got this area, which is just sort of a large area that I'll leave white until the end, really. I even put W for white, because I so often, particularly if you've got something like railings, or I'm trying to think of the other situations where there's a line of trees, dark light, you can get very muddled when you're trying to leave the white area. There's also a bit of a lit area around here, and I'll just leave that area very light as well for a long time. So the plan is literally a plan of the focal point and the tone associated with that. And then it gives me freedom to allow paint to run, particularly on this vertical surface. It's really, there's quite a lot of jeopardy if I haven't worked out where I'm meant to put paint. Staining paint isn't as much a problem as some people feel it is. I don't feel it too badly. I'll have my kitchen roll and I'll remove the paint very smartish if it goes onto the white area. So I'm just going to stick this up a little bit so you can see it.
You have a nice balance of colour as well too on it, Catherine, I'd say.
Thank you. Well, you know what? It was quite an early painting, that one. It's actually 2011, can you believe it? So I'm not sure. It seems to have great longevity as a subject, but you can already see the slightly brighter colour scheme that I'm getting involved in just from the electric blue. I've also got a little bit of alizarin crimson, some highlights, and I've actually started moving away. My mainstay has always been sap green. Sorry, that's burnt umber. Sap green. Sorry, raw sienna. It looks very yellow on the screen. It's of course, if you're familiar with it, it's a sandy colour. And I've just, if you want to go up a level from that, you can jump to this cadmium yellow, which is like acid orange. I don't know why they call it cadmium yellow. It's such a failed description, but it's so you can jump up a level of saturation, which I can't resist these days. I must calm down. I'm telling myself calm down on the colour front, but it's not working.
Well, you're working into your different stages, huh?
Yeah.
Your different phases.
Exactly. And I thought it's funny, isn't it? We do that, I think. So I've already got a whole load of colour on my tape, so I'll probably put it everywhere now. I haven't talked about brushes. I will do in a tick. What I just want to say is you might have noticed from the palette, that's my sort of cooler palette, and that's my warmer palette. They're not mixed paint colours. They're real colours or pure colours, more or less, even though they're very dirty, but they are actually pure colours. And so I actually mix on the page, not in the palette. So what that means is the palette is like a series of colour, wells of colour. So let me show you. I'm going to get the water in front. The water's just here. You can just see the top. So I've got a huge jar, one of those Kilner jars. And what I do is I've actually got, I use flat brushes because they're very sculptural. So with all this whooshing and softness going on, I quite like the ability to edge the areas very accurately. So anyway, it's a flat 1-inch Pro Art, what's it called? One stroke, I think they call it. That's the Asian influence. I quite like Chinese brush painting, the way that the speed of it. And what I do is I get a lot of water and I add it to each well in turn so that the paint is really, whoops, flicked it everywhere, really wet. And I'll start with the colours I'm going to use. I've already managed to make a mess. Let's get some kitchen roll onto that. All gone. So yeah, I will wet all these colours first. I'm going to wet sap green because it's my sort of mainstay. I have a sort of a midpoint colour of sap green, and then I'll add raw sienna or blues to it to switch it around, and then obviously other greens as well if I want to, but mainly it's turquoises and yellows and things to that. I've gone and chosen in my warmer palette, I've got some raw sienna, a big dab of that. It disappears, raw sienna, like anything. Some paints, even though these are professional paints, they dissipate more quickly, just the nature of the beast. And this is burnt umber that I'm wetting up. So then I've got some really quite intense pigment, which is a lump in the palette. And then, so if you're looking at the raw sienna, I've got a lump on one side and I've got like a well of single cream consistencies, how I think of it. And that's, even though it's off camera, that is what I'm going to be dipping my brush into, and I'll talk to you about the colours as I go. And the other aspect of keeping this atmosphere going is making sure that you use a lot of water. So the very first thing I'll do, I'll just quickly think about this plan and just identify my focal point. You won't be able to see this so well because it's pencil. Just a little reminder, really. And then I'll get rid of that. So the first thing I do is I go in, we talk about, do you start with dark colours first, or do you build up the dark colours? Well, I tend to go straight into the focal point here, and I start with that dark colour. I can't resist. I want to see the extreme tone from the white paper to the darkest colour. So I'm not going to worry about the whole tree. I'm just going to start with a couple of colours. I'm going to put in burnt umber, and because it's the darkest part of the painting, I've actually put my brush into solid burnt umber. It's very thick. That's probably about as much as I need there. And I'm going to also go into, just let that run, a bit of ultramarine. And those two together create quite a nice meaty, chunky, blackish colour. And I only really want that close to the focal point. I'm just aware of the shape of that there, putting a few angles in. And then the neighbouring tree. So you can see where I've started, it's actually this area here. Got to have more kitchen roll. So kitchen roll on hand all the time. I'll take a few more sheets, because I'm so vertical here, I'm going to be getting rid of colour very quickly. Oh, I didn't mention the phthalo turquoise, which is another very interesting paint. It's in this slightly cooler palette. It looks black at the moment on screen because it's solid, but I'll show you. That's phthalo turquoise when it's got water running through it, and it is the most beautiful transparent colour, and it mingles gorgeously with some more grainy colours that I've already got on, like the burnt umber. So that's turquoise, and I'm just put it in there because I know I'm going to have an area that's sort of mid-tone along there. And then while it's still wet, I'm just bringing in some raw sienna. And that turquoise and raw sienna together hopefully will make a little bit of a more natural green than just a green, a sap green or something. And I'm going to keep this colour palette fairly minimal. And so I've gone and put in some raw sienna up here. Now what I'm approaching here is this lit area of sunlight. So hopefully the fact that the tree itself is getting thinner in terms of the tone, then the sunlight it looks like the sunlight is acting on it, hopefully. So just softening up some of these areas. So this is just using a bit of water, and I'm going to see it just off camera. There is a pool of paint forming. I'll move back a little bit so you can see a bit more.
So is that because you're at a greater angle than your
greater
normal
angle? Yeah. So I will be subtly reducing the amount of water just a little bit for the demo, but it's still pretty running, and that's what I like. And I'll take this off shortly, and you'll be able to see all these lovely already. Let me show you now. I could draw it, pull it in, but much easier to show you up on next to the screen. So this is what was it? It was just got to remember now, burnt umber and the ultramarine, which are both thick and heavy, and you can see them grainy as anything here. And then on top of that, there was that turquoise, and this is what I like. And it's great for things like bark, actually, that collision between the two. It creates these lovely lines. So let's keep going. When we have our break, which hopefully I will have done a lot more painting by then, I'm going to need to change my water. So that's one of the reasons why it is quite good to actually have a break for me. So what I'm doing now is, because this is a larger area, I'm actually going over with water and then I'm going to drop the paint in. So it all depends on how much coverage I need. And this is a mixture of very loose, wetted raw sienna and some pretty solid raw sienna. I've got it over here. I'm going to still add some of the similar colours, the turquoise. And I'm just going across that the second tree and blending it a little bit. And I'm aware that I don't want this to run down here because this is the white of the page, which is where our water is going to be. So I'll do that later. I'm going to put in a little bit of that brilliant ultramarine, just because it's close to the focal point. And I'll probably have to beef that up in a minute. And I'm just tempted to put in a little bit of the first bit of water. I can't resist. And there'll be some more down here. So it's sort of semi-abstract at the moment. I'm not tightening up on anything yet. Let's put in some fairly solid burnt umber, which is not, it's sort of chocolate brown, isn't it, really? And this is the bank at the back. And we'll go across to some of this blue and a bit more of the turquoise. Probably rubbing against the microphone there, sorry about that. So I'm happy to keep popping this all on because I know I can lift off, and I haven't even begun to talk about that. So lifting off, the process of washing paint off the surface is another aspect of this wonderful board that allows me to attack, I'm just going to bring this out again, attack the board either after it's dried, ideally after it's dried. You can remove paint with the lifting off, and I'll show you that in a minute. So I'm just concentrating on this inner bit all the time. The rest isn't important. It's just going to be a supporting area. And because this is such a lit area at the back, I'm just flicking my brush sideways and I'm just trying to indicate a little bit of treetop without letting it go too far down. Now this is the phthalo turquoise again, and with this brush, the reason why this brush is so versatile is you've got corners, so you can start to use the corners to describe the edge of the area that you're working on. And it's amazing how creating some filigree edges breaks up these very large shapes into something that's more delicate. So whilst I'm not going to do all the detail until later, I start generally always and then work the detail in later. But I am going to just make sure those edges of the trees are just delicate. And it's quite fun. I have mentioned salt before. So the salt that I showed you on, let me get the other piece. The salt I showed you at the bottom of our winter scene, that's rock salt, so large pieces of salt sitting in each of these holes, these almost like cells. But today I've just got a little bit of cheap table salt. I mean, salt is such a cheap material to use, and these little grains I can chuck at the, normally it would be slightly less tilted than this, so I wouldn't have to throw it. I'm putting it around the tops of where the trees will be, and it's going to start to suck in some of the paint, because it's dehydrates, basically. Wherever it lands, it's going to dehydrate the area. There you go. Got to make it stick. That's the trouble with being so vertical. Now, salt takes a while to react, so I'm going to leave it to let it keep going, and I'm not going to re-wet it for a while. It can just keep operating. It's like a Polaroid picture or something. You have to wait, and I'll show you very soon what it actually does. Now, again, being on the vertical, you're actually swamping the salt a little bit, because as you can imagine, the paint runs down the page all the time, but it is already starting to work. I'll bring it up to the camera again. Just around here, you can see some of the sort of agitation almost. Well, it's a granular texture. I have got granulation medium as well that I put in just to create that frisson, but salt does a beautiful job too when it's this table salt.
So will it stay that texture then, Catherine?
Ideally, once it's dried, you'll knock it off, and the rock salt certainly falls off very easily, because you don't want it in the base of a frame once you've framed your picture. You just bat it off. But this very fine table salt, some of it will remain on the page. I would try and not attack it until maybe even overnight. Leave it to dry overnight, because it's very easy to smudge paint that's got salt water in, effectively, because salt water dries much more slowly than fresh water. So you can I'm impatient. I'm quite an impatient person, so I have to guard against going in too quickly, but it will dry. Different times of year it behaves differently. So in summer you get this instant dry sort of heat. You can see it much more quickly, and you can see it when you have a lot of central heating drying out your home or your studio. So that's also another occasion when you can see it, but it's working away very nicely actually in certain areas. And I'll give you close-ups later as well. So I've got to let that dry before I put the branches and tree trunks on top. And I'll show you the lifting off that I can do as well at that point. So for a lot of you, you'll think, well, it looks a little bit of a mess at the moment.
So Catherine, do you want to have a break now, or can you still continue on?
I can still continue. I think it's probably a good idea to continue just a little bit longer, just to get a bit more down.
Yeah. You've got another 10 or 12 minutes left anyway before break.
Sure, thank you. I will, yes, let's aim for that. So what I've got here is a little bit of raw sienna, and I'm going to I'm looking at edges really, trying to develop my other light area, which is this sun, and I'm going to just dissipate that area more. It's not going to be as definite as that edge. Just now, another element of this lovely flat brush is the fact that you can rub it on the page, and it creates a broken pattern on the top of the page. And you can imagine what it's like on rough paper. I mean, this is just cold press, like I said, but rough paper, it's really, really very soft indeed. Now I'm just putting a little bit of sap green. I probably should be a bit careful with that, because I don't want it to go down into the salt, but B, I don't want a sudden change. So what I'm doing is I'm just picking up some of that turquoise at the same time. And I need this area to be blocked in, because I've got to show that up. And if that's lit as equally as this, then it's going to compete. Okay, so I'm starting to get a sort of a funneling effect, hopefully. Let's develop some of this area lower down while we let the salt do its work. So this is an area down here, which is sort of very cool. It's just lots of sticks and grasses and rushes and goodness knows what. So I'm just putting in an area that I can then lift out later. I'm just going to put a bit more blue in around here, and then I'm going to show you what I'm doing with the water. I don't want to bother with the trees yet, they're not important. It's all about this area for me. So I'm going to bring in some blues across here. And I want to, while I'm painting the water, I'm thinking about the fact there will be a tree here. It's going to have a, effectively, I keep calling it a shadow, but a reflection, not a shadow. So I'm aware that that's got to be developed. There's more trees over here that sort of come down here. So I'm breaking up the surface of the water, and I want a very clear route where the light's going to run down the center. So I really want to cover up some more of this bottom left as well. Don't want that competing either. So you see, you're just sort of building into the area all the time without jumping around, just trying to think about that. And I think the principle I worked out fairly recently was you don't want to paint everything. You just, well, I don't. I'm just painting like a human eye looks at something, and everything else just supports that look. What I'm doing here is I'm going to be painting this little area of the tree there, and everything else is just going to draw your eye to it. So what I'm doing now is putting in the shadow of this tree, sorry, the reflection. It's going to come down here. And it's just a light touch really with the side of the brush to try and break up the water surface. Okay. So now I'm just going to create a bit more tone on top. It's like a second layer. Do you see here we've got some fence posts? They're not crucial, but I'm looking at this area now in terms of it's close to this focal point. I want to get it to the right shade, tone. So I'm doing, so I'm just putting in some fence posts so I know how they compare to this area here. So that's a layer on top. Okay. So can you imagine this area? Similar things will happen when I put the trees in on the top, which we'll probably leave till after the break. Just before the break, I just want to develop any more thick paint here, and then I'll be able to run some transparent paint over the top later when it's dried. So I'm just going to have to stand up in a minute because I'm painting sitting down, which is not normal for me. And then in that break, yeah, I'll be able to get some of my perspective in as well, because I do want it to.
Do you always allow paint to dry naturally, or do you use a hairdryer?
No, I don't. I tend to find that even on a micro level, the hairdryer rolls pigment around. I quite rely on paint sitting on the surface, and I think I don't know whether I have any proof, but it feels like a hairdryer just muddies it a fraction on this almost molecular level. So I tend to not use a hairdryer. Generally, I think it is good at just drying on itself. I don't have any, I'm not rushing to make it dry. I'm just putting in a bit of yellow now. I'm not, I don't need it to dry really fast. So this is now, the yellow is starting to create the idea of light, I think, a little bit. And then eventually I'm going to put in a bit of alizarin crimson as well. because where you can see things are lit, they tend to be a little bit more saturated in colour, don't they? And so this yellow is going to be where the light's hitting things. So I think if we have a little bit of a break, and then I will start to build up the trees. I'm going to lift off, that's a very important stage, just creating some of these subtle forms down here in particular. I'm going to get the other two brushes out, so just by way of sort of seeding into our break, I've been using this 1-inch brush. Oh, I see that Tia is not in the room. Hold on a second. I'll just make sure I admit her. Apologies for that. Yes, I've been using this 1-inch flat brush all the way along. I can use it for quite a lot of the trees, but I've got two other brushes that I tend to use a lot. The rigger is just the last little bit. It's you know, used for painting rigging in marine paintings of ships and things, so very fine, and that'll be just good for some of these very fine trees. So the second half is going to be quite a lot of tree work. And then the other brush is my lifting off brush. So that's just a stubbier version of the big brush. It's much shorter, so that I can actually transfer the strength of my push down the bristles and into the page to remove paint. So that's the lifting off brush. So that's the other one I'm going to be using after the break. So I've put on quite a lot of paint. I haven't put on quite enough, but you know, it's enough to show you some of this digging out that I'm going to be able to do later. And layering on top for the trees. But just before you have a little bit of a break, it's going to show you the salt here, that area up here. If it's on very obvious dark patches, you can see down here very clearly. I've just threw it. You saw I threw it at the page. But that's the sort of subtlety that I like. And believe you me, at the moment it looks like a great semi-abstract mess, but once you put the structure of the trees on top, it just gives that sort of backing. It's just a supporting atmosphere behind the trees. So it doesn't have to, I don't want features in this part of the painting because it's just going to distract. So I'll let that dry, and maybe we'll have a little bit of a break then. So
okay, so if we say we come back at say 20 to 9, that'd be okay then, really. Yeah, and
I'll probably be back before then anyway.
Okay,
and just
yeah, absolutely, yeah, depends how long it takes when they make a cup of tea. So anybody who wants to talk to each other, you can unmute yourselves as well too. I'm just going to nip off to get a quick cuppa, and we'll see you back here at about 20 to 9.
Lovely, thank you. See you in a shortly.